Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video and another ProQuest winning deck tech video. Today I'm joined by a friend, Okami, otherwise known as Cooper. I've known Cooper for a couple months now. We're in a group chat where we just kind of play some games and talk flesh and blood together with a couple other people, and he recently took Oldhim to his ProQuest and won pretty handily. He's been on Oldham for a while, and I just wanted to bring him on and kind of give his kind of take on the deck and also talk about the recent things that happened today with the ban suspension announcement. But we'll get to that when it's time to get to that. But Cooper, if you just want to introduce yourself, when you got into the game, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name's Cooper, and I got into the game around right before Tales of Aria. My first deck was actually kind of funny. I started off with Azalea,
Okay.
and it was really funny because I walked in the card shop with a CC deck of 3 of everything of Azalea, and they were like, "Here, we'll start you off with Blitz decks." And I was like, "No, I'll just start a CC." And we just went from there.
Did you
Just
did
got
you
my butt kicked with Azalea, and then I built Lexi.
Oh, that makes sense. And the CC thing triggers my memory. I know, but you started with other card games before this, right? Flesh and Blood wasn't your first one.
Yep, I've technically been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since I was 4 years old, and
Okay.
then I moved into Magic and got hyper competitive into Magic, and then I found Flesh and Blood at the end of COVID, and just been playing that ever since.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, well, Azalea is a funny hero to start with, I guess. I'm surprised you stayed around after that, especially that time frame. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Azalea
Right.
is super fun. So I guess like starting with Azalea, that kind of goes into the first question even more, is like why Oldhim, and when did you start messing around with Oldhim? I know it was right before Tails, so it was probably a natural switch, but kind of give like your thoughts on like why Oldhim.
I went into Oldhim because in Magic I'm a control player, and he was the first deck I looked at that I was like, this is a control deck. And this was back when Oldhim was very unpopular. People really weren't playing him except to counter Ball Lightning Briar.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him and I saw the card Crown of Seeds. And I was like, I love this card. And Magic, filtering cards is broken. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't see why nobody's playing this deck. This card's just broken. And I just practiced him a bunch, and yeah, it just went from there.
Yeah, scrying and like hard cycling in Magic is just like uninteractable, and you basically lose
Yep.
especially during certain points in the meta. Sweet, yeah, Oldtime's been that way. I know we always have spirit discussion because I'm the aggro player and you're more the control player, and then I guess like Parker and them are kind of in the middle, and Matt's like Matt doing whatever he wants. But yeah,
Yep.
definitely some
Pretty
really,
much.
he does like whatever random thing he thinks that day. But yeah, so kind of obviously you started with Oldhim. Did you have any past performances before this ProQuest season with Oldhim? Kind of anything that got you started as far as like the
um
pro circuit or anything?
this this surprisingly enough was my first like tournament that I did good in.
Mm-hmm.
The only other time I actually brought Oldhim to a tournament was when I played in nationals.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, I've mostly played aggro decks in tournaments. Like my first ProQuest season, I played Viserai, and that
Mm-hmm.
was where I got my first invite to Pro Tour. And then I switched over to Chain because Bloodsheaf got banned.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
But
sweet.
yeah,
And then for Oldhim going into this season, and then we'll kind of get into the deck, is like Oldhim kind of has a couple different ways he plays, right? Like you have super tank, like ice kind of builds or earth builds, and then you have like the more aggro ice builds with like stalagmite. And you seem like you've settled more on the aggro side, but you're also a little bit in the middle where
yep.
you can kind of pivot. So if you want to talk about your choice going into this meta on like which type of Oldhim you wanted to do.
My choice for going into this was because the more aggro list is, I just liked it better because every turn you could come in for 8 to 10 damage if you wanted to, which is very powerful. And on top of that, most of the deck blocks for 3, just like a Guardian deck, and you can pivot into that Fatigue clan if you play against decks that you just can't out aggro.
Okay.
So
Um,
just kind
mhm.
of just kind of helps.
Sweet. And then kind of getting into this, like, what were your matchups that you were kind of trying to avoid? What ones are you hoping for? And kind of like, was it more of a I'm gonna build a deck a certain way and hope I avoid X, matchups, or what did you kind of try to have a game plan going into everything?
I pretty much wanted to avoid any dashes that were running heavy defense reaction board.
Mm-hmm.
because no matter what, even on aggro Oldhim, that matchup's just really tough.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they can just play 3 unmovables, 3 reinforces, just and then 6 other defense reactions and just block you out and set up their pistol plan, it's really hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the only thing I was worried about.
Okay. Yeah, no, that seems like most of the dashes I've seen have actually, I guess it's because of the hyperdriver, mechanoid, all that stuff. Like most of them have been boosts from what I've seen, but they, similar to your list, dashes can just, even though they're set up for aggro, they can just immediately pivot. It doesn't, they
Yep.
just start pitching cards and they don't have to really change cards that much. They just side in their items. So yeah, going through a list here, like obviously the equipment, anyone who's been playing Flesh and Blood longer than like a week knows most of these items. But kind of, the first thing is, and kind of looking at your sideboard, what is, I guess the main thing with equipment most of the time is A, when do you run Crown of Providence versus when you run Crown of Seeds? And then B, like what is your thought process with Rampart versus Stalagmite? I feel like those are two of the biggest decision points for you.
So essentially, you run Rampart in every matchup that you run Crown of Seeds for the main big point. Mostly because pitching a blue is filter a card, prevent a damage, and then prevent another damage with Rampart. And then if for some reason they break the chain, that's a 3rd damage prevention off of 1 blue, which is really, really good value. And but for matchup wise, pretty much Crown of Providence only comes in against like the really aggressive decks like Visceride, Phi, just decks like that that are hyper aggressive because you're going to be racing them. And you
Mm-hmm.
run Crown of Providence when you're running Stalagmite.
Okay.
Because if you don't have Crown of Seeds, there's no point to run Rampart because you're never going to have those floating resources.
Mm-hmm. That
So it's
make
just better.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And again, not a Guardian player myself, but I had honestly never seen, or not never, but rarely seen an Oldhim run Crown Province until I'd say like the last month or two is really when it got more
Yeah, it's
popular, at
very
least.
new.
Yeah, because I saw a couple of Oldhims running it, and I had, obviously, as an Azalea main, I had Oldhim actually run. They ran Crown of Seeds against me more times than not, but they did run Stalagmite against me, which I thought was really interesting. That's a different discussion for another day, but I can definitely see it. That's like your first decision point. And then going into this, we see a lot of the tried and true like attacks. Endless Winter is really big in aggro. Oldhim, obviously, Glacial Footsteps, Pulverize, Spinal, and Command and Conquer. I do notice you have a lot of the heave mechanic in here as well, which I've seen a lot of Oldhims using for the most part. But kind of talk about what's your general play lines as an Oldhim, barring like, you know, the God turn or anything like that. Like, what are you looking to do turn over turn for the most part?
Well, if we want to talk about a God turn,
Yeah.
I did actually have a God turn against a Dorinthia
Mm-hmm.
during my tournament. I drew a hand where I had Pulverize in hand with Arouse the Ancients and an E-Strike.
Mm-hmm.
So the God turn was I Roused the Ancients, revealing Pulverize. Came in for 7 go again. Then I E-Striked for 5 go again. And then I swung an Icy Hammer for 4.
Oh wow.
Which was just it was just insane value.
No, yeah, that's pretty nutty. And
It
you're giving a
was
frostbite after already
that
dealing 12 damage. So,
that's like the God turn.
mm-hmm.
But um besides that, the turns that are really big in this deck would probably be um Tunic up with a Pulverizing Arsenal. You can just come in for 14,
Mm-hmm.
even without the heave mechanic. And then also one of the big parts of this deck is Mage Master's Toma Findall. I
Mm-hmm.
got that off a lot in the ProQuest, and it easily gains you 4 or 5 life.
Okay.
And then can fix your hand and did a lot of work.
Yeah, that's one of the most disheartening things. I know I had a couple matchups on Azalea with Oldhim. And it was like 6-6, 5-5 in life, and then they tome, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Because
Yep.
in some of those matchups, like 3-4 life is legitimately 2 turns worth of damage on an Oldhim if you're trying to grind them out. So it's very disheartening. What would you say is kind of like the MVP? One, what's kind of like the MVPs of the deck? Like what really won you some games, and even ones that surprised you? And then also like what is kind of like your most underrated cards in the deck, you would think?
Um, what won me the game a lot would probably be I really haven't played a lot of Oldhim with them yet, and I've been loving them. Is the red Glacial Footsteps and the red Thunderquakes.
Mm-hmm.
Just that flat, just attacking for 1/4 of your HP is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
It makes people have to block really weird, or some people just don't want to block it because there's no on hit effect, and then later in the game that dominated attack just kills them.
And
But
having, oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, you're good.
I was gonna say Thunderquake. I've noticed that a couple of times just playing on Talishar. Like, if you know you're gonna have a card left over, maybe you got tempo at some point it's off a pummel or something. Being able to basically play a Thunderquake for 1 blue and pummel it, so essentially for like 2 cards, you're attacking for 15 is just pretty nuts. I have
It's
noticed
insane
that
value.
it's almost it is impossible unless they have a snag or something crazy to like prevent that type of play. It's almost unguardable.
Yeah. And then for probably underdogs, well, I guess the other card that obviously won was the classic CNC pummel combo.
Yeah,
the amount of people that Arsenal a card against Oldhim and just hold it there, waiting for a big turn, and then they see a CNC pummel and they just lose it is insane.
Yeah, exactly. And I've noticed that a lot of Oldhims are pivoting off the earth reactions. And I have noticed that just in general, like in this deck, you have 4. And I know we had talked about before you went to your ProQuest about swapping in like 1 Tome of Harvest just to try to get a little bit extra and cycle if you absolutely need it. Have you felt a difference? I mean, I know you're aggro, but have you felt a difference with the lack of earth and how you approach that moving forward?
Actually, it was actually fine with 4, but I probably will go up on the earth now. Just because it changes, obviously.
Yeah.
Without having Winter's Whale, I don't think you need as much ice.
Okay.
But and then, the Tome of Harvest was huge because I decided to run the second Pulverize.
Okay.
So if you ever heave the Pulverize and then draw like a 2-red hand or something, and then just can't play it next turn, having that Tome of Harvest, because you can't crown a Seeds of Phase Up card, is really, really nice.
Okay. That makes sense. And then we'll talk about the changes here in a second. I know we didn't put this in like the script, but like if you want to talk about like, you don't have to go super in depth, but just round by round, like what matchups you had, just kind of give an idea what your meta looked like up until the final.
Yeah, so my round 1 was an interesting one. I played against Icelander, and they were more of an aggro Icelander, so they weren't trying to combo at all. They were just trying to disrupt and race me. But I just kept going 10 damage, 10 damage, 8 damage, 7 go against Swing Hammer. I just kept like the pressure up and never gave them an opening, so it was a pretty quick game for me. And then my round 2 opponent was a Dorinthia, and this was actually my only loss of the day. I actually hadn't played the Dorinthia matchup in probably 4 months prior to this. So it was my first game against Dorian Oldhim in 4 months, and we went to time and tied.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Because I wasn't playing aggro enough against her. I was just going like mostly fatigue, and they were running 9 stunts and 2 remembrance. So there's just no way for me to fatigue them. But we went to time, and then we just both lost. And then after that, I kind of got a bye. I got to play against an Arachne, and he'd only been playing the game for like 2 months.
Okay.
So that was kind of unfortunate for him. So I just, that game wasn't very hard. I just kind of just won that game. But then round 4, I played against my buddy who was on Dash.
Okay.
Which that was unfortunate to have to play against him. And I had thought I lost that game. He had all 5 items out on turn 7, like turn 6 or 7. He had all 5 items out. But I was just keeping up so much aggro against him that I got him down to like 5 HP, and I was still at 20. And then I just got a dominated Glacial Footsteps out for 10 dominate and ended the game.
Okay.
And then round 5 for my win and in, I played against Dorinthia and played the matchup more correctly, and then beat him. And then he snuck into top 8 and 8th seat. And then in top 8, I had to play against another Dorinthia, which was another buddy of mine. And then top 4, I got to play against my first Dromai of the day. There was like 4 Dromais. And
what do you think about the Dromai matchup? I hear different things. I hear some people say it's Dromai favored. Some people say it's Oldhim favored. I hear something different every time.
it heavily depends. Like I felt very favored in the game, because he was on the Snapdragon build that only runs like I think it's like 15 dragons.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much just like the only dragon making is like rake the embers, maybe like one Uvia,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just running like snatch with snapdragons and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I pretty much just kept blocking their attacks, making sure I wasn't taking too much damage, and then killing their dragons.
Okay.
And they were even running 3 remembrance, and I still got through them.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely felt very favored that game because I sat at 31 HP for I think everybody counted to like 12 turns. Which was kind of just stupid.
Yeah, they're.
And then
It sounds like they're like siding for aggro a lot. Like they were really hoping to
yeah,
get matched up with fives and stuff.
and then I yeah, I was at 31 HP and then I finally took 1 damage to a Blaze Headlong and then I pitched Heart and gained it back.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, so that was top four you said?
Yep, and then finals I played against the same Dory that I beat to get into top 8 and then we had a really good finals match and I had that god turn I was talking about, the Rouse the Ancients god turn
Mm-hmm.
with E-Strike and the hammer. I did that game, and I even played a Pulverize that game.
Yeah, pulverized is just. I got back to back pulverized my first round on Saturday, and I was like, "What can I do?" Like this guy literally just did 28 damage in 2 turns. Like it's
Yeah.
nothing I could do. And it shuts off your next turn. Yeah, that. I mean, obviously playing Dory, the meta wasn't. Luckily, you kind of dodged the fives, but I mean that's how PQs are. Like you got to especially in this meta, like you got to kind of hope you face your good matchups, avoid your bad. But at the same time,
Well,
Dory is not an
surprisingly
easy
enough, I was
matchup.
hoping to play against Fi.
Really? Okay. Yeah, because if you're
I
more
actually
aggro,
really
that makes
like,
sense.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like when I play against Fi's, I just Endless Winter Fuse, Command and Conquer Pummel, just um
Mm-hmm.
Spinal Crush Pummel, just there's just so much disruption against Fi for these types of lists. I've never really had an issue against Fi with this type of list.
And then going into the sideboard, and then we'll kind of get into the changes real fast, kind of give people a little bit extra on like what we think. So the sinks and the staunches, when are you going more defensive? When are you bringing those in?
Those came in against every Dorinthia game.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, the entire sideboard went into every Dorinthia game.
Okay.
But the staunches and sinks pretty much just go into any matchup that the deck has 4 hits and stuff that you're gonna need to block.
Mm-hmm.
So like Sink will go in against every Fi, every Viscera, all those types of decks, and then the staunches are pretty much for stuff like Dorinthia, Briar, and Guardian Mirrors.
Mm-hmm. And then I noticed you have the Rouse the Ancients inside. So kind of, is there a certain matchup you bringing those in for?
Honestly, they came in every game. I probably didn't need to put them in sideboard. I
Mm-hmm.
used to have them in sideboard for specific matchups, but it seems like every matchup in this meta it's good in.
Okay. Yeah, it
So
makes
it's
sense.
probably something I'm gonna move just to say that it's main deck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And then we kind of get into the changes today, and I know we won't go too crazy because we could talk about that for like that's its own video, to be
Oh
honest. Like
yeah,
talk about it with
the
people.
everything's gonna change with those changes.
Yeah, so I think the hypothermia we can kind of ignore. Like Oldhim can sub that out. Really doesn't affect. Like yes, it hurts some matchups like Dromai and stuff like that, but really not
It
too
doesn't affect
crazy.
this build.
Mm-hmm.
It
This
does
spell.
affect other Oldhim builds because a lot of Oldhims run 3 hypothermia
Mm-hmm.
because of the Dromai matchup. If you're on a
Okay.
slower build, you need the hypos for that and dash.
Okay, that makes sense. But what do you think? Like, obviously, in short, like 5 minutes or less, what do you think that the whale band kind of does to Oldhim, and where do you think it goes from here?
I think Oldhim runs a little bit more Earth, so I think because you're not pitching ice cards to whale, I think maybe you're going to see more Oldhims with 3 Toma Harvest and maybe some Breakgrounds in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to pay for, because those are all 3 cost Earth cards, so then you can pitch them to Titan's Fist. But besides that, I think the deck stays pretty much the same for at least my type of deck because it's just going to be you're going to be just more aggro. Just
Mm-hmm.
keep going taller. You might even see some like Earth Floor Surges to buff an attack or something. I think that no, not is it Earth Floor Surge? I'm trying to remember the card's name. The pay 2 get +4 attack.
Oh
plus
yeah,
6 if it's red. I think it's Surge,
Earthlord Surge.
but
Yeah, no, and I did notice that just jogged my memory here, and I might just be missing something. But what was the reason for not including Okanold?
oh right, we
That's a
should
good
talk
one.
about that.
Yeah.
So I didn't run Old because of how aggro I am, so I'm not going to be pitch stacking as much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be trying to go for as much value in a turn as I can, and just pitching value.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also because I only run 4 Earth cards, so it's gonna be really hard for me to pitch stack an Earth and Ice into a hand.
Mm-hmm.
The Oakenolds, you pretty much have to be lucky with it, and also because of the Pulse ban. With Pulse being banned, it's a lot harder to fuse Oakenold.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I just felt for this meta, Endless Winter was just a better card than Oakenold. So I decided to run 3 Endless Winners and just cut the Oakenolds, because there's only a certain amount of reds you can really run in a Guardian deck, and I feel like I'm at that good number of reds, and I don't think any of these reds would come out for Oakenold.
That makes sense. And Endless Winter is an interesting card. It's one of those cards that like you when you get presented. I noticed this when I was playing Azalea, and even I played with Katsu. Is like you have two choices. Like it's one of those cards where I think it's similar to like I guess the best analogy is like when people play Rise from the Ashes and the Blaze Headlong. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get all 7 points of damage because no one's gonna block a chain 1/5 unless you just hate yourself, right? Especially if they're running Mask of
Right.
Momentum. And it's the same thing with Endless Winter because either you block if it's fused because either you block out and you have no turn next turn and you just gave Oldhim a 5 card hand likely, or you let it hit and just don't try to not activate any cards like activated abilities or hero abilities, which isn't that hard, but at the same time, like it's pretty much 8 free damage 9 times out of 10. Like it's gonna hit because unless the only time it doesn't hit is when your opponent simply has a dead hand and they'll just throw everything at it, get 4 frostbites, and go have a nice day. But like I noticed as Azalea, like I had to take it. Like I didn't have a
Yeah.
choice, and then I just basically couldn't Azalea ability the next turn because it would have costed me a frostbite.
Yeah,
So
it's actually kind of crazy how many people forget how Endless Winter works, because not every Oldhim has ran it
mhm,
recently. Like a lot of people who are like on fire stuff completely forget that Fire ability makes a frostbite,
mhm,
that this actually counts for weapons.
mhm,
So whenever you activate Ember Blade, or if you're on Kodachis, you get frostbite every time.
mhm.
So a
Exactly.
lot of
Yeah.
people forget that, and then they kind of just screw themselves over by eating the damage.
Yeah. Katsu trigger all of it. Even activating Tunic, right?
Well,
It's
Katsu trigger, that doesn't do it because
oh
it's
yeah,
not
it's a
activated.
triggered effect. It's not
Yep.
activated effect. That makes sense. Yeah.
But like
Um.
Tunic as well isn't activated, stuff like
Mhm.
that.
No, that makes sense. And then I guess the last card, and then we can wrap it up here. And I just thought about it. You said
Yep.
Fi is choke slam. Is that just not as big of a deal? I know that, or like is the one where you can't play cards 3 or greater, or was it just you already feel comfortable enough? 3 or less. You can't. You already feel
Yeah.
comfortable enough into that matchup to where it didn't matter as much.
So because I knew my local meta was more aggro, I actually originally had 3 choke slams in this list,
Mm-hmm.
but or not choke slam.
It's a
I had 3 crush the week.
crush the week.
Crush
That's what
the
it's
week.
called. Choke slams that can't gain.
Yeah,
Whatever.
can't
Yeah.
gain
Yeah.
attack.
Mm-hmm.
I had 3 crush the weeks originally, but I decided to cut them.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to cut them for the 2 red Thunderquakes,
Okay.
because I felt Thunderquake was better, and because of my local meta, I put in an Arcane Lantern,
Okay.
because we do have a local Kano player, and I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
if there's gonna be other Kano players, and I feel like you can't run AB2 into a meta where there might be a Kano.
Especially you, where it's easy for you to pitch 3 away and not really hurt your turn too
Yeah.
much. As opposed to the other. Okay. Awesome. Well, that makes sense. Well, congratulations to you. I know that.
Thanks.
Are you looking? Are you going to any more ProQuest this season? Are you going for week 3 or anywhere
No,
like that? Nope. Just gonna stick with what you got.
too
And
far away.
what did I know? But like, what did you open for your gold foil? Or are you keeping that a secret?
I got a Romping Club,
Romping Club. Okay, well, that's a good one.
and it's already sold.
Already saw.
I shipped it out yesterday.
That's what most people are doing. One of the guys, well, Brody. Most people know who Brody is. He placed second at one ProQuest that had a Rosetta Thorn as the gold
Ooh.
foil, and then he won the next ProQuest the next day, and he got a Koa Frost. So he was like, "Don't talk to me for the rest of the day." He was so upset. But no,
That's funny.
it's pretty funny seeing what people do with these. Like even people sell them sealed, like they don't know what it is, type
Yeah.
stuff. So It's really good. Well, congrats to you. If anyone wants to view this list, it's down in the link below. It's probably a better list for you to look at, with upcoming changes, more of an aggro pace, be able to obviously probably sub in some earth cards and stuff. But overall, it's in a pretty good spot. And we'll have to see what the data was for Oldhim week 2 because week 1 was pretty substantial. But yeah, thank you all so much. And if you want to sign off here, Cooper, and we'll head on out.
Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoy the list.
Yep. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a good one.